Hi, welcome to today's Talking Wellbeing live discussion. Just waiting for the guest speaker to join in today. Hope you're well. Hi.
Hello, how are you?
Good, thank you. Sorry about that. I think it was a bit of connection issues there.
That's okay. I'm just trying to make sure that I'm in the frame. Okay, let's move this back a little bit. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you well.
Okay, perfect. There we go. I think we're good. Okay.
You're all set to go. So thank you for joining me today. This is Navneet Mann. She's a mindset business coach and lifestyle coach as well. And before obviously we get into today's discussion topic, can you tell us more about how you moved from your career as a lawyer to being a coach?
How much time do we have today? So, thank you so much for having me here. I'm so excited to have this conversation. Obviously, Talking Wellbeing has been, a platform that I follow and feel very aligned with. So, I'm appreciative for being here and a little bit about how I transitioned from law into being a coach. It's a long story, but essentially, I was practicing law for a number of years and felt like it was quite misaligned with me for a long time. I myself was battling with very high levels of stress and anxiety, which was not managed very well, and eventually led to my personal burnout a few years ago. So, during this whole time, while I was feeling burnt out and just feeling kind of lost in terms of where to go, what to do with my career, I found coaching more as like a healing mechanism for myself. I didn't quite know what it was. I thought it was just a bunch of motivational talk. And I realized how powerful of a tool it was in order to help me get through the burnout and the anxiety and the stress that I was experiencing. And once I went through that journey myself, I realized this is something I can help other people with. There's other people that may be feeling this way. So that's when I decided to get certified and become a coach myself. And I guess the rest is history.
And like you said, you kind of fell into it initially, not really knowing what it was. And
Yeah.
as well, as they're kind of going through life, they may not know certain things either. Could you speak more about mindset coaching specifically?
Yeah, so it's a really big world, I think, mindset coaching. And of course, you being in psychology yourself, you're really aware of all the nuances. So coaching is, first, I always like to make that distinction. It's different than therapy and counseling in the sense that it's not about going and healing trauma or looking at the past. It's more about how to move forward and achieve your goals. So all coaching is about you being at, point A, wanting to go to point B, but not quite knowing how to bridge that gap. And that's where a coach comes in and is able to help you do that through a variety of different ways. In terms of mindset coaching specifically, we as people get programmed and absorb a lot of what we see in the outside world, right? Especially from the ages of 0 to 8, we are essentially absorbing things that we're seeing with our parents, our society, TV, any influence. It is being absorbed. So what we're doing is creating beliefs and stories in our mind that we hold to be true. They almost become a fact. And then we spend our life basically playing out those stories and operating from those stories and beliefs. So the idea of mindset coaching is really deeply embedded in subconscious reprogramming, is that you can actually go and change those old stories, right? You can go and rewrite some of those old beliefs that may have been holding you back for a very, very long time. And we do that over a period of time in so many different ways. But that is for when people that feel stuck or feel like this is just how I am or I've always been this way, that's a perfect candidate for this type of work, is because you don't have to be this way. And I think the people need to start understanding is that once you can start learning how to work with your subconscious mind, work with, what's going on inside, you can actually change the external world and change your life. And it's a very powerful tool.
Hmm. And like you touched on there, that we all have certain stories, whether it's been from upbringing or even in situations as an adult. I think we can't discount either. So, what sort of
Absolutely.
things do people generally say to you when they come to you when it comes to business and mindset? So, what it looks like, because sometimes we can use the word stuck, but people can't really define it.
Absolutely. So what it usually looks like is oftentimes embedded in fear. Like, I want to do something, but I'm afraid it's not going to work, right? So for me specifically, um, I work with career professionals who are either on the verge of burnout or know that that's not what they want to do. They don't want to work in this career. They want to make a transition into entrepreneurship, work for themselves, have more freedom. However, they are afraid that if I make this move, I may lose everything that I have, or afraid that they may not be successful being able to, do whatever they're passionate about and work for themselves. So it comes up as fear. That's one way of being stuck. The not knowing, I just don't know what to do. I'm not sure what the steps are. I don't know how to do it. So oftentimes that is another thing that keeps people stuck. It's another story. And one that comes up quite often is kind of a lack of self belief. It's feeling like I'm not good enough for this. It's not possible for me. Yes, this person may have done it, but here are all the reasons why my situation is so unique, and I can't do it, right? That whole word, I can't. That's another indication that you are feeling stuck somewhere, right? You're stagnant somewhere.
Hmm. And that you touched on, the I'm not enough, that can translate into so many things, even when it comes to your business or when it even comes to your personal life. And in terms of obviously fears or self-doubt, are there certain practices that people can start to do?
Yes. So I think the first thing I always tell people when it comes to these things is to acknowledge that that is the dialogue that's happening inside. We are so used to operating from this limitation that we just accept it. We just say, well, this is just how I am. That XYZ is not possible for me, and that's just how it is. And we don't realize that change is possible. So the first thing is just to acknowledge that this is the dialogue going on in my mind, and I'm now seeing where I'm limiting myself. I'm now seeing the places that feel scary, or the places where I feel like I'm not enough. So, it that's the first most foundational thing that I always say to people is just start seeing your thoughts and detaching from them. Start to create distance between what you're thinking and who you are, because our thoughts run a mile a minute. Every single thought cannot be attached to your being, who you are, your identity. It's not that. It's just like a computer program that's running in the background, and you can upgrade that program at any point. But first, you need to understand that the program is no longer working for you. So that's the acknowledgement piece.
Hmm. So actually becoming conscious is what we would say. I'm going to use some therapy to become a bit more aware of what we're actually thinking and feeling, rather than it being almost like an automatic, that autopilot, as we would say.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So then what do you do once you become conscious of it? Now you have to actually see this thing for what it is. And a lot of people are also afraid just to face that, right? We don't want to acknowledge or have to change something that has just, felt a little comfortable. One thing I always say is there's your comfort zone is probably the most uncomfortable place that you can actually be in, right? You may think it's the easy thing to do, but you're oftentimes not happy just being in this stagnant place. So once you acknowledge and become conscious and aware of what's going on in your mind and how that's playing out in your life, well, then it becomes about, how do I change this now? Now, what are the changes that I require? Because you need to take action in order to make those changes. And that's a lot of hesitation comes there. A lot of pushback comes where you have to actually, what you're saying, I have to do something about this. I actually have to pay attention and make changes. Yes, You do. So that, all of these are little building blocks and they seem so simple, but these are the most difficult things for people to change because they are so deeply embedded in your habits. So thinking a certain way is a habit. Thinking in limitation, thinking in lack is a habit. Thinking that everything is hard is a habit. So how do you start breaking that habit and creating new, more empowering habits?
Hmm. Like in terms of obviously, like you're saying, habit formation, sometimes we don't even realize the things we do. So how we start the day or even how we end the day. And okay, yes, habits can be positive, they can reinforce great things, but they may even hinder us.
Yeah, and oftentimes I think our subconscious habits do hinder certain things. They're not all bad, but just because you've always woken up a certain way and done the same routine every single day does not mean that's now serving you at this juncture in your life, right? Where you are and what you're trying to achieve. It may not no longer be aligned with the habits that you currently have. And I think that's something, again, that's difficult for people to acknowledge because it's working, right? What they're doing, their routine for them has been working just fine. So they don't actually understand that there is something that could be improved in order for them to reach that goal, right? That point B that we were talking about earlier. So habits are just one thing. Like I said, thinking is a habit as well. The way you think, your thought patterns, those can be habits. So how do we start to recognize the thought patterns that we're in and what type of influence does that have on the rest of our life? I once read something about this man who did an experiment where he decided not to complain for 30 days, like just wouldn't complain about anything. And I read that and I thought to myself, well, that's not hard, right? Like anyone could do that. And probably within an hour, I was already thinking complaining thoughts. We like that's a habit, right? We complain so much. And imagine what we're telling our brain when we're constantly saying, this isn't working, this is bad, I don't like this, I'm like that. It's, all of these negative things, because that's really what a complaint is. It's something that you is not going the way you want it to go. So therefore, things are not working. And if we're constantly programming our brain to say things are not working, well, that's what it's going to learn. Therefore, things will not work. So even something as simple as trying to remove complaining from your daily habits, I challenge everyone to do that because that's actually a difficult thing to do and something I am consciously aware of, and I try to do myself in my daily life. So there's so many little tweaks that we can make in who we are. It doesn't mean that what you're doing now is absolutely wrong or bad. It just means that there's room for improvement in order for you to achieve that thing that you want.
Hmm. And like you said, like small tweaks. I think sometimes we think that if we're going to make a change, we have to do so many things at once, or they have to be quite a dramatic change in order for our business or our life to look different.
Absolutely. And that's where people get overwhelmed. So going back to, like what does it look like to feel stuck? Oftentimes it looks like this huge list of to-dos. Like I'm here, and if I want to be there, I have to do 100 things, and that's going to shake up my life too much. I don't have time for it. I'm too tired. Therefore, I won't do anything. Right? So we get so overwhelmed by all of the changes that may be required for us to actually go and achieve something that we'll just do nothing instead, which makes it doesn't make sense logically, but it keeps you again in that comfort zone where if I don't if I don't really want that thing that bad, then maybe I'm okay where I am. So one of the things that we can do to start reducing that overwhelm is looking at things in almost phases or in small little blocks, right? What's the one step I can make today that will move me closer to where I want to be? So that's a really nice way to not eliminate overwhelm, but learn how to manage it.
Hmm. Because that's the thing as well. There's some things that we can start to manage rather than going in with the approach of, I just need to get rid of it.
Yes. Oh, I love that. People often will try to just get rid of things, right? Like, how do I get rid of my fear? You don't actually, there's no such thing as getting rid of your fear or, fill in the blank. What I always say is, say it's fear, for example. I'm afraid to do this thing because I don't know what's on the other side. I always say fear is like knocking on the door. And when you hear that knock, it usually means that you're on the edge of your comfort zone. There's something, the next level is available for you, but you have to open that door and you have to walk through it, which means you have to face the fear. So you're not getting rid of it. You're being able to process it, to walk through it and see what's on the other side. And once you do that, that same fear no longer exists. Once you walk through a door and see that there's no danger, you're not afraid to walk through that door anymore. There may be another door in your future, which is fine, but as we start, walking through and opening those doors and facing those fears, we understand that we're capable of so much. We're actually very resilient as people. So you are capable of facing so many of these fears that oftentimes we just don't want to open the door. We're just like, oh, I'm just not going to see what's on the other side and maybe everything will be fine and it'll just go away. But it doesn't, because that knock will soon turn into banging, until you actually go and look at what's happening there.
And that's why sometimes I think we don't want to look at certain things, because we just think, okay, if I don't look at it, like you said, it's not there. But actually, sometimes we do get stuck in familiarity.
Mm-hmm.
As you rightfully said initially, that in itself then starts to turn to discomfort. Because I know you speak about things like purpose and fulfillment. So, for example, if you just try to escape the fear, it also then gets in the way of creativity
Yes.
and trying new things.
Yeah, and it does get in the way of what's available for you at this next level. Like if we're going to talk about familiarity, when I was a practicing lawyer, every year that I practiced, I became more and more knowledgeable. I got more experience. I became more familiar with the work, and I became more comfortable doing the work. So it wasn't the fact that I didn't know what I was doing and that's why I wanted to leave. It's staying in this place and kind of carving out this comfort zone, so to speak, was making me even more uncomfortable because deep inside I knew that there was something bigger that was knocking on that door, but I wasn't looking at it and I wasn't answering it because I was so afraid of losing what I had. Even though I wasn't happy where I was, you almost want to hold on. It's like the lesser of two evils. Like this is what I know, and it might not be great, but what if that's even worse? You know? So there comes a point where you almost have to trust yourself to be able to handle whatever is on the other side, because familiarity can be nice, but without any kind of challenge or without knowing that without feeling fulfilled in that familiarity, then it's not really, you're meant for something bigger. So I always say, like, to me at least, when you start to feel that you're stagnant, that you're not moving forward, that you're not feeling like you're actually fulfilled or happy, that means that there's something else available for you that you're not looking at currently. There could be a whole world of opportunities, but you're so stuck in what's familiar that you don't want to go and explore what's outside. And we just live in a fear struck society, and it's very much, we live in a lack society. Like, oh, if you lose this you might not have anything left, and then our brain goes to overdrive and you think, okay, well, if I leave this job I'm going to lose all of my savings, I'm going to end up on the streets, I'm not going to have anywhere to go, I'm going to be homeless, and everything's going to suck. And you forget that as people, we are intelligent, we are resourceful, we are resilient, and that you have so many different skills to put into place in order to achieve what you want. So for me, familiarity can be, it's a double-edged sword, right? It can be something that makes you feel experienced, makes you feel really good, makes you feel like you know what you're doing, but at the same time it can also be the thing that takes away from what's possible for you.
Because what we would say familiarity or conditioning, sometimes we'd use those words as well. And like you said, because you get almost stuck or you just repeat something. Initially, it might be something that serves you. So, for example, you gave your career. Yes, you may have been successful in it, but there was that repetition, and it almost sounds like it moved away from your own value systems
Yes. Yeah.
as you're exploring. That might be something else that I look at as well, that actually, as you grow, your values can also shift and change to some extent. And then that be bigger than the fear.
I love that you brought up values. I always say if I could just teach or support people with one thing for the rest of my life, it would be their values. It would be helping people really elicit their values and live by their values. I think this is such an important part of who we are that we often forget that we or are never really encouraged to explore. When I was growing up, nobody ever really asked me what my values were or helped me understand that I could have my own values that are different than maybe my parents' values. I think we grow up thinking that our upbringing in our society, like those are our values, or whatever we're given from our parents or from a religious standpoint, however you grow up in your community, we feel like, oh, those are my values. They are synonymous with my upbringing. They're synonymous with my belief system, because that's something I adopted from others, and that's just not true. Like you said, our values grow and evolve as we do. And if you can recognize that at different points in your life, then it becomes easier to be able to make these shifts. It becomes easier to make changes and walk away from certain things in order to walk into new opportunities, because you're being aligned with your values. And just to speak about, the familiarity and the discomfort of my career in law, I didn't realize, but what was happening at the time was this discomfort was because there was friction between my values and what I was doing. And I say this to my clients all the time, is that if you are in a place where your values are not at the forefront and you are trying to go against your values to fit into something, it's not going to work. You're not going to be happy. You're not going to be able to feel fulfilled, and you're going to keep getting that same friction and frustration over and over again. And I definitely experienced that. I was working at a law firm where the people that were running this firm were so grossly misaligned with my values. It was day and night difference. And it wasn't until I became consciously aware, like, oh, no wonder this isn't working. No wonder I'm unhappy here, is because this is so misaligned with my values that I can't make myself fit. It's like a round hole and a square peg. You know what I mean? So if we can start as people to start checking in with ourselves every so often to say, are my values still what they were last year? Is this still feeling aligned? If not, what are the tweaks that I can make? It doesn't mean that every year we're switching jobs or doing something drastic. Sometimes it's just a matter of, if one of my values is my well-being, then am I honoring that value, or am I only just working and focused on growth or a different value, right? Is there a balance between my values, and what can I do to honor some of these other values of mine? And I think once we start getting in that habit, life becomes a little bit more enjoyable, right? Every aspect of life starts to shine instead of just focusing on one, which often for us is our career, business, success, or something like that.
Hmm. And like you said, it's taking that minute to even reflect on it. So whether it's, I actually know other friends and even other coaches who have mentioned, like you rightfully say, maybe even doing a stock check of your values. It doesn't necessarily have to be like the start of the year. I know people think about resolutions, but it could be mid-year as well. Whenever you feel possibly internally, okay, something doesn't seem to be fitting here.
Yeah.
I feel either more tired, or I feel not so joyful, like flagging up some of these feelings, like the conversations we've had as well. Just recognizing, acknowledging, okay, I've got this emotion with me. What is that? Get curious. And then reflecting and reviewing certain values you may hold.
Yeah, and it's okay to let certain ones go. If at this, life kind of happens in seasons, and there's times where certain things might take more priority. Your career might be taking priority right now. Maybe your health and fitness or relationships are taking priority tomorrow. Whatever it is, it's okay to say that maybe these are the couple of values that I really need to live by or honor right now, and then these few, I'm going to incorporate them in a different way. And it's almost like primary and secondary in a sense, and that's okay. I think sometimes people feel that they're not honoring themselves if every single value is not showcased every single day. And like you said, it's more about just taking stock. It's more about when those frustrations come up, knowing that you don't have to stay in this space, just looking internally and saying, okay, well, is this, what is going on right now? Are my values being, suffocated, for lack of a better word, or am I, has something changed for me? Maybe I don't value this thing as much as I used to. Like for me, I put a lot of value into, I think, status and accomplishment prior to, obviously making all these changes. And because that was so important to me, that's what kept me going and got me through law school. That's what got me the amazing jobs that I got and got me working at these like downtown firms and living this life. And it was more about that prestige because I valued that so much. I didn't consciously know that I was valuing status until I looked backwards, but I was. And that was why I got into that career. When I realized that that's not what I value, it's not about the status for me. It's more about this connection with people. It's more about making changes for people, really helping them see things in a different perspective. Then I realized, okay, well, that job is not allowing me to do that. That career is not aligned with what I want to do. And it makes it easier to let go of something that you were previously attached to.
Hmm. And that also takes a fair amount of vulnerability as well. I know that's where the work is as well. Actually, reflection, acknowledgement, then looking at certain steps that you might take, like you said, the daily steps that you might take.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there is no reflection without vulnerability. We can't run from that. Whether you want to share that with others or only with yourself, that's a personal decision. But if we are not allowing ourselves to be vulnerable, we are essentially lying to ourselves and we're missing out on possibly a lot of joy that's available to us because we are hiding the truth from ourselves.
Mhm. And also, in terms of, like we said, it's not as simple. I know people say, okay, I can't just do everything that makes me feel joyful, but it's also looking at fulfillment. And as we said, intentionality and purpose. I'm aware with your work, and you also talk about permission. That's such a
Yeah.
powerful thing. A lot of the times, we don't even give ourselves permission to do something. We kind of take ourselves out of the game from the get go.
Yeah, we do. That is something that was a big lesson for me is I didn't realize it was myself that was in my own way. I was stopping myself from making all these, changes that I wanted. And I see that a lot with clients is they don't give themselves permission. And a nice little perspective shift is how would you treat the situation if this was your best friend or, your partner or your child coming to you with this dilemma? You know, would you say, no, just stay where you are, stay in your comfort zone, don't explore anything else, it's not worth it? Or would you say, hey, it's okay. It's okay if you want to make a change. It's okay if you want to explore something different. Like we often give other people permission all the time, even though they may not be seeking it or they don't need it from us, but we do. We tell people this is okay. I will support you. I will be there for you. It's going to be fine. We're giving them permission to step outside of that comfort zone, right? And test the waters, but we don't do it for ourselves. It's never okay when we want it. So recognizing sometimes just that simple shift of, wait, if roles were reversed or this was my best friend, how would I have this conversation? And be your own best friend. Treat yourself like you're in a relationship with yourself. This is the most important relationship you will ever have in your entire life. So honor that. Be kind to yourself. We are our biggest critics. We can be so hard on ourselves and limit ourselves in so many different ways without even recognizing it. Just that I'm not good enough talk. I can't. This is scary. I'm going to fail. We don't talk to anybody else like that. Can you imagine having a conversation with their best friend saying, don't try it, you're going to fail, you suck, don't you remember you're not good enough? We've known this since you were a kid. You should never try anything. Oh man.
And that, what was occurring to me there is actually self-compassion and empathy. We can give that more freely to somebody else, but struggle to give it to ourselves.
why is that? I always wonder, why is it? Is it because I mean, everyone has a different reason, and like sometimes it's you don't feel like you're deserving of it, or you feel like you never really got it when you were younger. Or a lot of my clients, they feel I've always had to work really hard and struggle to get what I wanted. So without that fire under me, I don't know how to achieve. And if I wasn't like this, then I wouldn't have gotten how far I was. So, it's almost that they've convinced themselves that working this hard is the only thing that really works. So there's no time for self-compassion. There's no time to be kind for themselves and to slow down. They have to keep going and going and going. Otherwise, they won't be able to achieve what they want.
And yeah, I think it is as well. People seem to think if I'm hard on myself, it will motivate me to do more. That's not always necessarily the case because it can slide into having very critical self talk.
Yeah.
It's only able to, well, you're only able to move forward if that self talk is also nurturing, as well as, okay, yes, you can be logical, you can be pragmatic. But like you said, if we spoke to another person like that in that way, they would never take it, but we seem to think it's okay to do it to ourselves.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible how the contrast between how we treat others and how we treat ourselves. And, I wanted to touch on what you said about that being hard on yourself. It can accumulate to so much criticism that it actually paralyzes you. So you might think that if I'm hard on myself, I'll get it done. But you start to solidify these stories about how difficult things are, or whatever you're telling yourself, and then that criticism actually ends up stopping you from making the progress that you want. So it doesn't work in your favor. So it really does need to be balanced with that compassion and kindness towards yourself. It's almost like, we all have masculine and feminine energies and different tendencies and things like that. And there's a really important balance that we need to strike, because our masculine self is more about doing and the logic and is this going to work? And that's what keeps us going. It keeps us in action. But the feminine side is more about rest, more about taking a holistic approach, slowing down a little bit, and kindness and nurturing. And oftentimes in our society, especially, I mean, in North America, I'm sure England is the same, like the Western world, we don't honor that slowing down, because if you're not hustling and going and achieving, you're nobody. You'll be left behind. So we've built this society as a rat race, and honor people that are burning themselves into the ground in order to achieve society's highest levels of success. But those high levels of success come at a very high price, right? They come at the price of your happiness. They come at the price of your relationship with yourself, with others, right? Your well-being, your health, right? And if you don't have that, you have absolutely nothing. So what is it that we're trying so hard to achieve when we're giving so much up?
Hmm. And like you said, it's obviously you've mentioned like burnout and that how that sort of showed up in your life as well. And also mindful of the time, but also the question that James has asked, and that's actually a good question to ask at this point, is what are your favorite self-care routines? Because of course you have burnout, and sometimes we say, I know what it is, but I don't know what to do with it.
Yeah. And I think this can get really tricky when you are going through burnout, because you feel like your capacity to handle anything extra is quite low. And oftentimes, even things that are meant for self-care can feel like a burden. Like for me, it used to be I love to work out. So if I'm feeling, overwhelmed or stressed out, I'll just go to the gym and, get myself centered. And then at some point, that became a burden. That became something that now was another to do on my list. I remember I would come home from the law firm. I'd have, my time slot booked in for the gym. And I had about 15 minutes before I had to leave the house. And I remember changing into my gym clothes and sleeping on the couch for 15 minutes, because that's how exhausted I was, that I couldn't make it that 15 minutes to get myself to the gym to do something I enjoy, because that now became a burden. So it's so important that, our self-care routine really is something that it feels easy, that is something that we can do and really feel grounded in. So, over time I've created my own routines, and something I really love to do. I love to meditate, so I meditate every day. And you don't need to be, a monk in the Himalayas meditating for 3 days in a row. You can literally just take intentional breaths anywhere you are, just even connecting with your breath, taking 3 deep intentional breaths. That in itself is meditation. It's enough to get you grounded, because we're, obviously calming our system when we're feeling heightened sense of stress. So that's something that I do every day. I like to do yoga and stretch in the mornings. I go for walks, like just things to move my body, and take myself out of the stressful environment. And I think everyone's self-care looks different. For me, it's really just always focused on how I can get myself centered and grounded and just feel like I'm in control and I'm not being taken in all these different directions by external circumstances, whether it's work, whether it's some, a conversation I had with somebody. How do I just come back to that groundedness?
And almost it's like you self-regulate, because
Yeah,
when emotions are heightened or you are experiencing burnout, you may experience it physically, mentally, psychologically. And so obviously it's assessing, okay, what do I need in this moment? If it is, like you said, a short meditation, or if it is going for a brief walk, or if you need to speak to somebody, of course, like we say, your self-care can be tailored to where you're at in your lifestyle.
absolutely. And I think people don't necessarily recognize that, because in the media, self-care has become this like buzzword, and it's all about doing extravagant things, and that's fine if you want to go for a massage or do something like that for yourself. That's absolutely a form of self-care, but it doesn't always have to be something that is, difficult to plan or anything like that. There's things that you can do in your day. You can literally just stand up from your desk and stretch and just move a little bit, right? Just shift the energy, and which we often end up sitting in when we're doing high stress jobs. So I like to do that. I also, another form of self care is setting digital boundaries, and that's something that I was not good at in the past, but being able to say, this is the time I'm going to shut down, and it's okay to take a weekend to not do work and just, focus on the things that bring me joy. So it can look like so many different things.
And that's so key to have as well, because I think we don't necessarily consider that, because we're getting so much information at us, whether it be through media, our devices. Of course, there's great power with that. It can give us knowledge, we can absorb more content, share content. That's how we're doing this live. But there's a line, there's a boundaries almost that we need to keep with ourselves, because it could potentially lead to that burnout or that overwhelm that can then go and affect your mindset.
Yeah, which really nicely ties back into the awareness and the consciousness piece, right? So it's, if you're not aware that all of this is happening in the background, then you can easily go down the road of burnout. But the more conscious we can be about our thoughts and what's going on, and do those assessments of checking in with yourself, it's actually a great way to manage or even avoid potential burnout.
hmm And those check-ins, like we rightfully say, it could be a thought, it could be a feeling. Like I've had clients come to me as well. Some people can describe it as a sensation in their body. So they might say, I feel a lump in my throat, or I feel heaviness in my chest. Some other people may explain it in a very logical, pragmatic way, as in, oh, I have so much on my schedule. In my diary, I've got this deadline. So it's looking at those cues as well. I think sometimes we think burnout only presents itself in one way.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a great point, is that we all process things so differently. We all communicate with ourselves differently too. So like you said, sometimes it's more in the thought, people are able to articulate the words, sometimes it's a feeling. And sometimes it's none of that. You can't quite put your finger on it, but something is just off. You're not being yourself, right? You find your conversations are different and your mood is different, and those are indicators. So I think when things start to feel off balance, that's just the indicator to look at what's going on and how long has this been going on, and is there potential to change this and shift something in my life, because that's, without that change, without that reflection, you're probably going to repeat the same patterns.
hmm And that's also what we're kind of be looking at today as well. It's kind of stopping that feedback loop sometimes as well. That we may have a pattern or we may have a habit that if it's not serving us or if we're feeling like, okay, something's not right here, how can we go about doing that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's it. Sometimes I feel like, you know, if you if you've been in this space for a while, working with people for a while, you start to use different language that, you know, maybe the average person is kind of like, what are they talking about? But that's patterns are just something simple to recognize with yourself. Like, has this happened before? Have I been here before? Have I felt this way before? And that's when we start seeing, wait a second, this might be a habit of mine to keep repeating this, right? So what is it that needs to change? And I think, like I said, my number one tip is always just tuning in and becoming aware of what's happening. And the more we can do that, the quicker the changes can be.
For sure. And I see actually there was a question here previously. I'm trying to see what it was. I believe it was from James again. How important is it to look at our inner like functionality? Oh, sorry, I think there seems to be a bit of a technical issue. I think something has happened with the connection on Navneet's side. Let me just send her another invite.
I'm sorry, I got kicked off of there.
Not a problem. I thought,
I was trying to find the
oh,
question and it just,
it's okay. This is what happens on IG Lives. You have to be prepared for the unexpected.
oh my goodness, my apologies. So, what was the question?
I thought, oh, I asked her a question. She was there 1 minute
Probably,
and
she probably didn't like the question. She just left.
left the conversation. Now she's back. If anyone wants to join now, we had a bit of technical issues, but we're back. We were looking at obviously mindset, but it was the question of how important is it to look at our inner functionality.
How important is it in general? I think for me, my journey has led me to this place where I think it's the most important thing to look at our inner functionality. And that's not something, if you asked me 3 years ago, I would have ever been able to say because I was so obsessed with doing, going, hustling, achieving, that I never even, you couldn't have convinced me that anything internal really matters besides knowledge, right? Besides experience and knowledge. I never really thought about the way my mind and body is processing things. So I think it's the most important thing. Change happens from the inside out, right? Our life is, it's seriously, it starts from the inside first before it's ever created on the outside. So if you really have a place where you're feeling stuck or not fulfilled, right? The most important thing to do is to go inward. And not all of us know how to do that. Like I said, it wasn't something that I was familiar with. And at that point, really, like, get the resources, read the books, get the podcast, or get help, get a mentor to, or, you know, some sort of support to be able to understand the inner functionality that may be causing some of this pain or that may be keeping you stuck.
Mm-hmm. And having those like intentional practices as well. And you can start off gradually, like for myself, I find journaling really helpful to really get
Mm.
in tune what's happening with me. And of course, like you said, yes, there's mentors. It's why people come to either coaching or they go to therapy. It is to get that insight, or at least you can just stop and sit with some of what's happening with you, or to do that reflection.
Yeah, and I often get that from people is that I've tried everything now. I've tried everything and that's why I'm here is because it's not working. And you know, it'd be great if people could recognize that first without before wasting all this time and energy, but that's just how we're conditioned is to keep trying to do something different. And then when the doing becomes, you exhaust all the doing, that's when you come and say, what else is going on? What shifts can I make inside? So yeah, being able to reflect, I think, through journaling, just through processing your thoughts, through meditation or silence is really, really powerful. Absolutely. You're cutting out for me a bit. I don't know if it's my internet or if it's yours, but I think what you're talking about is hustle culture and the fact that yeah, it's not worth, no. No, you're quite fuzzy for me. I'm not sure if anybody else that's here can anyone hear Amrit? If anyone
I
is
can
here,
hear
please.
you now
Oh,
clearly.
you can?
Can you hear
Okay,
me?
yes, I can hear you. I can't see you properly, but that's okay. There we go. Okay, so um sorry, I think your question was around the hustle culture and the fact that we are so conditioned to be in the doing instead of the being. Is that correct? Yeah. Okay, I can't hear you. You might be muted. But yeah, so I didn't recognize this for a long time because we're rewarded for doing everything, from the time we're in school is a reward for what you achieve, what you can do. It's not really about your emotional intelligence or the way, or your compassion, or the way you carry yourself. There's no rewards for that. Therefore, we're conditioned to always be doing more, to be achieving more, so we can get the praise. And that's what we go into the workforce with. That's what we go into, our careers with, is how to do more. And that's why they call it climbing the corporate ladder. You're putting in work. So how do we go and shift that? How do we go and, without having to exert so much energy and time, still be happy within who we are? And that's when it comes to the being. Because no matter what situation you put me in, no matter what type of work I'm doing, who I am on an identity level, my being does not change. I don't need to shift in order to match my circumstances. The circumstances can shift to match me. So I think that there's a lot to unpack when people are really stuck in that hustle culture, but to know that there's a better way to do things. There's a better way to actually become the person that you want to be, and to be able to achieve all of these things that you want. And that's when it starts with the sense of being, which can be a foreign concept. I know that for a lot of people. So if you're curious about that, go ahead and message me and I can tell you more about it. But that's really where the magic happens.
Mhm. And on that note, obviously, how can people reach out to you and connect with you?
So obviously you can reach out to me on Instagram. My handle is at Navneet Mann _. You can connect with me on by email at info@navneetman.com. I hang out on LinkedIn a lot as well. Again, it's just my name. So yeah, and if you're interested in learning more about any of what we've discussed, or are somebody that wants to leave their, corporate or professional job and want to work for themselves but don't really know how to do that, then I've got a signature program that really helps with that. And I also work with people directly one-on-one to help develop the business of their dreams. So go ahead and DM me if you're curious, and we can always chat to see if that's a right fit for you.
Thank you so much. And I will obviously link everything below this. Apologise to anyone viewing that the connection issues, but we got through it, Navneet.
I'm glad we did. This has been really nice. Thank you so much for your time and for having me. It's been a great discussion.
Thank you so much to you too. And for anyone like watching, I hope this gives you guys hope that actually, even if you feel and think right now I'm stuck or whatever that classifies, that there is a way to move through it and work with it.
Absolutely.
Thank you for listening, everyone, and watching. Take care of yourselves, and thank you again.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.